Hello and welcome to the Pirates vs. Ninjas Shaman card showcase. Let's hop right in. First up, we have the Silent Surge, a 5-mana 6/6 ninja, Stealth and Overload 1. A simple and strong ninja for the Shaman. It's very comparable to the Ogre Ninja, where you replace the downside of a 50% chance to hit the wrong target with the downside of Overload 1. A much more controllable downside, although in some cases it can be a problem. A bigger problem than the 50% chance to miss, although again much more controllable and less heavy on RNG. A solid and simple minion for any ninja deck in Shaman. Next up is the Deathbiter Weapon. This is an interesting card. It's 2 mana spell, and it gives a friendly minion +2/+4, and whenever this minion attacks, gain Overload 1. So it's a very strong buff for only 2 mana. +2/+4 is an incredible buff for only 2 mana. But the downside of whenever the minion attacks, you gaining Overload 1, which means every single turn that this minion is around and you choose to attack with it, the next turn you're going to have Overload 1. So it is a very slow card, because you want to play it, you want to kill something, but then the next turn you're going to have 1 less mana. And if you keep on attacking and keep on trading effectively, you are, granted, trading effectively and doing good stuff with that minion, but you're constantly losing tempo from having Overload 1 and being a turn behind, which is a big problem. Next up is the Missing Link, a 3-mana 3/2 beast with the only card text, costs 1 less. So this card at first seems kind of pointless. It's a 2-mana 3/2. What's the point? Well, the point is actually, very simply, to evolve it. Anything that affects the cost of a minion, jousts, evolutions, recombobulator, anything of that nature, Missing Link is a fantastic fit for. Instead of evolving into a 3-mana minion, it evolves into a 4-mana minion, but it only costs 2 mana. Instead of being recombobulated into a 2-mana minion, it gets recombobulated into a 3-mana minion. When you joust, you have a higher chance of winning a joust when you have this in your deck. It's a good card for that kind of situation and for those kind of decks. Next up is the Ninja Totem, a 2-mana 0/3 totem with Stealth and Inspire. Summon a 1/1 ninja. 1/1 ninja is just a 1-man token, doesn't do anything special besides be a ninja. Now, the real advantage of this card is that it is essentially, against many decks, a straight hero power upgrade. Instead of summoning 1 thing, you summon 2. It has Stealth it's very difficult to get rid of for a deck without board clears. Of course, the problem is most decks without board clears are aggressive decks. So this is a very slow card to play against an aggressive deck, meaning that even though against an aggressive deck, this card is very likely to be safe and allow you to use your hero power very effectively and get tons of value out of it, the problem is that the aggressive deck might just be able to run you over before it actually matters. Against a control deck, the 1/1 ninjas are actually going to be even better in certain situations, because even though they do have area of effect to remove this, sometimes you might be able to get rid of all their AoE and simply overwhelm them with the combination of totems and 1/1 ninjas. Next up is Ancient Medicine. It's a 3-mana spell. Fully heal all damaged friendly minions. Give the rest +3 health. So you get to either choose, do I want to heal a minion or give it +3 health on your turn. You know, you have a bunch of minions, you have a big old board full of minions, and you're thinking about how you want to trade. You can trade first and then heal them all, or you can give them all +3 maximum health and then trade. You can do some weird combination of the two, and that's really what Ancient Medicine is. It's sort of like a board control Bloodlust, if that makes sense. Instead of Bloodlusting for 3 attack to either trade up or just to kill the face, you put this in some kind of mid-rangey control deck, and it allows you to control the board better by getting better trades and more value over your opponent. Next up is LemARRGHian Evolution, a 1-mana rare spell. Transform your friendly pirates into random minions that cost 2 more. So this is an evolution, not an evolution, an evolve rather, but more specific. It's only pirates, but it also is costing of 2 more, not just 1. So your 1-mana pirates become 3-mana cards, at random of course, and you know, your Skycap and Crag can become a 9-mana minion, your Drake Corsairs can become 6-mana minions, and you can cast this on your gang of pirates, get tons of minions that are much higher in cost, and on average, hopefully, better than all the pirates you had. Of course, you do lose the pirate synergy there, however, you can maybe even then evolve them normally, and get some crazy combos going in that way. Next up is the first epic of Shaman, Deval. 2 mana, transform a minion into a random minion that costs 1. So this is kind of an offensive evolve style effect. Instead of growing your own minions, you are shrinking an enemy minion. So it is hard removal, it is only 2 mana, it is cheap, however you still do have to remove the 1-mana minion, which is why it's a little bit cheaper than something like Hex, as a 0/1 with Taunt is generally better for the player who did it than a random 1-mana minion. You can get some really bad things if you cannot get rid of them. For example, you might end up getting unlucky and there might be a pit snake that happens to get a really good kill on one of your minions. They might get a dust devil and have rock biters and you can't get rid of it, and that's a big problem. And a lot of other things like that can cause problems with Devolve, but if you have a few minions around to deal with it, a few spells even, it'll be dealt with, and it'll be a great piece of card removal for a control deck. Next up is Overcharged Drake. 5 mana, 2/5 dragon. Very poor stats. Very, very poor stats. So the effect had better be good, and the effect is Battle Cry. If you have a dragon in your hand, gain +1/+1 for each overloaded mana crystal. So that's kind of a big piece of text, and it's also not very appealing at first. It's asking you to have two things happen. It's not only asking you to have a dragon in your hand, essentially saying, hey, can you play a dragon deck? It's also asking, can you be overloaded a bunch for it to be good? So then you say, well, how overloaded do you need to be? So you have to be playing a dragon deck, first of all. Dragon Shaman's not really a thing. You also have to have a lot of overload cards. You have to be playing an overloaded dragon deck. So you're asking a lot of things for this card to be good. So how good is it? Well, a 5 mana 2/5 is not good. However, if you're overloaded for 2 from, let's say, a Lightning Storm, it can become a 5 mana 4/7. Now that's about average. That's not anything super fancy. You know, Fuegan has that stat line. So it's not anything super fancy or interesting. It's sort of vanilla, but it is still okay. And you did sort of get something beneficial out of the overloaded mana crystals. This is a dragon itself, so it can, you know, trigger the other one in your hand or simply be a dragon activator. But more notably, and probably most powerfully, it is usable with elemental destruction by destroying everything and then playing the Drake, which with 5 overloaded mana crystals is going to become a 7/10 for only 5 mana, and the enemy's board is going to get probably completely wiped. And then the turn after that, you can play any combination of cards which get rid of your overload. So a dragon deck can be heavy control with a bunch of dragons and overload and stuff, and can wait for the big combo of the elemental destruction plus the Drake, or you can, you know, pull the trigger a bit early against a more aggressive deck. You can cast it on turn 6 with just any old random thing. Plus, for example, on one turn you play a Lightning Storm. You have 2 overloaded mana crystals on the next turn. Let's say you're at 10 mana, by the way. So you have 2 overloaded mana crystals, the next turn you go in with 8. You elemental destruction plus Overcharged Drake. That's a total of 8 mana on that turn, which is exactly how much you have. But since you technically have 7 overloaded mana crystals, this thing gets +7/+7, which over multiple turns you can build up extra overload to make the Overcharged Drake even stronger. So the Overcharged Drake is a very strong card. If you're using dragons and overloaded cards, the Overcharged Drake is a fantastic addition. Lastly is the Shaman legendary General Yabam. 6 mana, 6/4 pirate. Battlecry, add Overload 1 to all non-pirate minions in both players' hands and decks. So this is a huge change in the game state, a massive change. You're looking from changing all the cards from being simply normal cards to all the non-pirates having Overload 1. Now if your opponent is playing a pirate deck, there is still a good chance they're going to have some non-pirates. And same for you, really. However, you are the Shaman, so you have ways to either benefit from it, such as Tunnel Trog, Unbound Elemental, or simply remove it with your Lava Shocks. And this card is not quite a combo breaker. For example, you know, it stops a 2-turn combo, because your opponent will not be used to paying 1 overload, so they're going to play their minions and then they're going to have 3 overload the next turn, let's say. They play 3 minions, they have 3 overload, so it stops your opponent from keeping up the pace. Every time they play a minion, they're going to be losing a little bit of the pace they had prior, and if you are playing a ton of pirates, you're going to be outpacing them a little bit at a time. It's very comparable to the Mistcaller at the end of the day. It allows you to outpace your opponent a little bit at a time. And even, again, similar to the Mistcaller, you can return this to your hand, play it again. It is add Overload 1. And Overload 1, you know, you can put it on multiple times. You can add 6 copies of Overload 1 to a minion, and then every single minion that's not pirate that gets played gives the player 6 overload, which is of course ridiculous, but you can theoretically do that if you return it to your hand with useful Brewmasters, ancient Brewmasters, and whatever else you can think of. That is the Shaman card showcase for Pirates vs. Ninjas. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.